Welcome to this explainer. If you have poured time, money, and let's be honest, a whole lot of passion into creating a beautiful, thriving underwater ecosystem, you already know how precious that setup is. Today, we're diving straight into what is, hands down, the ultimate low-risk insurance policy for your established aquarium, the quarantine tank, or QT. It might seem like an extra chore at first glance, but trust me, this is the single most reliable way to protect your aquatic investment. Because think about it, a single drop of contaminated water can sometimes be enough to crash an entire ecosystem. So how do you actually protect your established aquarium from a sudden devastating disaster? Well, the answer comes down to realizing that cross-contamination is the absolute enemy of a thriving tank. Every single time you introduce a new fish, plant, or coral, you are essentially rolling the dice. Is this new arrival going to bring in a hidden parasite, a bacterial infection? Without a dedicated system in place to intercept those threats, you're exposing your entire main display, your fish, those delicate plants, and your carefully cultivated beneficial microbes to potential ruin. So here is our game plan for today. We'll start with your aquarium's insurance policy, then move into building the basic setup, filtration and water chemistry, acclimation and daily monitoring, and finally, the clean reset. All right, let's jump straight into phase one, your aquarium's insurance policy. A quarantine tank is essentially your strategic hero. It takes all the risk away from your main display because it serves three distinct purposes. First, it isolates new arrivals. Second, it gives you a dedicated, clear window to watch for disease, completely free from the distractions of a fully decorated display tank. And third, it lets you administer medical treatment safely. See, some medications can absolutely devastate the beneficial microbes and live plants in a main tank. The QT isolates that chemical warfare entirely. Moving right along to phase two, building the basic setup. For the physical build, you really want to keep things simple. A small to medium bare-bottom aquarium, usually ranging from 10 to 20 gallons or about 40 to 75 liters, works brilliantly for most community fish. But just as important as the tank itself is where you actually put it. You've got to prioritize environmental stability. Place the QT in an area with a stable temperature, completely away from direct sunlight and drafts. And make sure it's easily accessible. You're going to be monitoring this daily, and out of sight, out of mind is a total recipe for disaster in quarantine. Now, unlike your main tank, which is probably packed with porous rocks, deep substrate, and complex decorations, your QT should be entirely bare bottom, literally zero substrate. Why? Because it makes siphoning waste and spotting tiny, fallen parasites incredibly easy. But to keep the fish from getting overly stressed out in an empty glass box, you just add a few non-porous hiding spots, like PVC elbows or tubes. They give shelter, but they're super easy to pull out and sanitize between uses. Just remember, avoid anything porous in the QT. Next up, you have to equip basic life support immediately. You'll need a heater specifically sized for your QT's volume, and hey, don't just trust the dial on the heater, throw in a separate thermometer to constantly verify that temperature stability. You also need to ensure adequate oxygenation with aeration or an air stone, especially if your filtration doesn't create vigorous surface agitation. This is absolutely crucial because stable oxygen and temperature are just as important as any medication you might use. A lot of disease outbreaks actually get way worse simply because the water conditions swing and stress the fish even further. That brings us to phase three, filtration and water chemistry. The real trick here is deciding on your ready approach for filtration, because it completely depends on your specific goals. If you just want a simple and effective setup, go with a sponge filter or a hang-on back filter with its own dedicated media. Want speedier readiness so you can set up a queue on a moment's notice? Keep a spare sponge filter hidden and running in your main tank so it's already biologically active when you need it. And if you're actively medicating, sponge filters are definitely the preferred way to go. They're vastly easier to keep running and swap out, which is a big deal since many medical treatments require you to pull out chemical filtration media anyway. Okay, I want to pause for a second because I literally cannot emphasize this golden rule enough. Never, ever transfer equipment from the main tank back into the QT without disinfecting it. Avoiding cross-contamination is your #1 priority in this entire mission. Think of it like this. Your QT is the contaminated zone and your main tank is the safe zone. Don't mix the streams or you totally defeat the purpose of having this insurance policy in the first place. Before any fish even arrive, you need to establish a mature biological baseline. Start with dechlorinated water, using whatever conditioner is appropriate for your setup. For marine systems, keeping salinity consistent and matched to the acclimation water is absolutely vital. Ideally, your QT filter should be fully mature and cycled. But if you can't cycle it in advance, you have to be ready to do immediate, frequent water changes. Test your ammonia and nitrite levels early and often. The second you see those levels spike, you've got to be ready with fresh water to dilute that toxicity. All right, let's roll into phase 4, acclimation and daily monitoring. To execute this phase flawlessly, you're going to want to build what we call a cute kit way before you actually need it. Have this dedicated toolkit prepared so you can act instantly without ever being tempted to borrow stuff from your main tank or, your kitchen utensils. This kit needs dedicated nets and containers used only for the QT. Grab a siphon or gravel vacuum specifically sized for this smaller tank. Have your test kits for ammonia, nitrate, and pH or salinity right there and ready to go. And finally, observation lighting. You need enough light to see the fish clearly, but you want to avoid harsh lighting that will just stress out those already terrified new arrivals. When it's time for acclimation, make sure you never overstock your quarantine tank. When your carefully selected new arrivals show up, float the bags to match the temperature. Next, gradually add your cleaned QT water to their container to gently acclimate them to your water chemistry. But crucially, avoid dumping any of that transport water into your QT. That water is usually a total soup of wastes and pathogens. Once they're released, watch them like a hawk. The stress of moving in those first 24 to 48 hours can actually mask existing symptoms, or it could be the exact trigger that brings a hidden illness right to the surface. During this whole quarantine period, you are the commander, and surveillance is your main job. You're looking for any of these early warning signs. Watch for changes in their appetite, or maybe a rapid breathing rate. Look closely for discoloration or clamped fins, which are classic signs of stress. Watch for flashing or rubbing, when a fish repeatedly scratches itself against those PVC pipes or the bare bottom. And obviously, keep a sharp eye out for physical signs like white spots or unusual, stringy feces. Also, promptly remove any uneaten food to keep waste down. And if you do see symptoms, make sure to treat the specific problem based on the most likely cause. Don't just assume every white spot is the exact same parasite. And that leads us right to this profound warning from the experts. If you anticipate treatment or spot symptoms, remember this: using the wrong product or dose can be more harmful than the disease. It is so critical that you research your medication, understand the correct dosing for your specific species, and verify your water parameters ahead of time to avoid fatal errors. Some fish simply cannot handle certain common medications, and we want to fix the problem, not make it worse. Finally, we reach phase 5. The clean reset. Now, a question that always comes up is, how long do I actually keep them in there? Well, patience is key here. A common guideline is several weeks, but really, you should base your quarantine duration on observed health and actual testing, rather than just staring at a calendar. The exact length depends entirely on the fish species, how severe any symptoms were, and whether you actively had to treat them with meds. The golden rule? When you are unsure, always err on the longer side. Don't rush a fish into your main tank just because you're eager to see it in the display. Once the quarantine is successfully over, or if sadly a disease forces you to restart, you've got to execute the clean reset protocol to guarantee no pathogens are lurking for your next arrival. Fully clean the QT. If you had a serious, stubborn outbreak, don't even hesitate. Just completely dispose of the sponge filters and media. It's just not worth the risk. Disinfect all the surfaces, including those PVC hiding spots. And always, always keep that QT equipment entirely separate from the main tank to prevent any reoccurring introductions of those bugs. Which brings us to the end of our explainer today. With the right setup, stable temperatures, dedicated equipment, reliable filtration, and consistent monitoring, a quarantine tank transforms from an annoying chore into a highly effective low-risk insurance policy. So I will leave you to consider this final provocative thought. Is your beautiful established main tank truly safe right now, or are you just one unquarantined new arrival away from a total outbreak? Thanks so much for joining me today. Stay curious, stay structured, and keep those aquariums thriving.